even if you were in a position where you did have a high level of authority and power, the best product owners don't use it because they're operating in an environment where actually engagement, buy-in, alignment is actually essential for success across an organization, let alone outside the organization. Relying on authority generally doesn't create alignment.
Welcome to the Product Agility Podcast, the missing link between agile and product. The purpose of this podcast is to share practical tips, strategies, and stories from world-class thought leaders and practitioners. Why, I hear you ask? Well, I want to increase your knowledge and your motivation to experiment so that together we can create ever more successful products. My name is Ben Maynard, and I'm your host. What has driven me for the last decade to bridge the gap between agility and product is a deep-rooted belief that people and products evolving together can achieve mutual excellence.
And we are back for episode 2 of 3 with Geoff Watts. Now, I was so fortunate to have some one-on-one time with Geoff, and I couldn't resist but go deeper on product mastery. So grab yourself a pen and paper. As always, think of someone to recommend this episode to. Geoff is going to enlighten us all on what product mastery really means to him. So sit tight and enjoy the episode. And we're back. Episode 2 of hopefully 3, depends on how quickly we talk or how long the conversation goes on for, where I'm joined once again by Geoff Watts. Hello, Geoff.
Hey, Ben. You all right?
Yeah, I'm not bad. Yeah.
Classic British response there. Not bad.
Not bad. I was just trying to figure out whether I could try and create the illusion that it's been like, it's been a week since we last spoke and I've achieved this and I've done that, but no, it's not. It's like
transparency, visibility. It is what it is.
Yeah. I was just having a drink from my unfeasibly large cup.
Oh, this is the downside, right? Because I haven't had a chance to refill mine, so
that's why I get a massive one. So when we were on holiday at Christmas time, my little boy did a little like kids raffle thing where they had to throw, excuse me, I think it was like darts or something at balloons, and he won this, and he picked this for me because it says no more bad days.
Nice.
And he said to me, "Here you go, Daddy. If you drink from this cup, you won't have any more bad days."
Very good. Well, I'm not quite sure what the equivalent of this would be, but there's a phrase that stuck with me for a while. There's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing. I think there's no such thing as a bad day, just inappropriate mindset, perhaps.
Maybe. Although some days can be pretty shit.
Yeah, I'll often preach to. I was working with some product owners last week, and I said, if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this, it would be to try and treat every situation that you come across with this mindset of it's not good, it's not bad, it's just interesting.
Yeah.
Whether that be a stakeholder interaction, whether that be the response from customer feedback, whether that be the developer's estimates, whatever it be, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just interesting.
Yeah, that takes a lot though, doesn't it, for people to take that, I don't know, to conjure up some curiosity.
Yeah.
To say, actually maybe this is interesting and I want to delve into it, because I think it's all too often our own emotional responses to things get in the way of us being curious, right? Finding things interesting and then delving a bit deeper.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's part of the thing. In episode 1, we spoke about the challenges with these kind of knowledge-based courses and how what you're trying to do in the Agile Mastery Institute then actually gets people with a bit of purposeful practice. It's very contextual. And I think this is part of a challenge, isn't it? You give people the knowledge, and then as soon as they have an emotional reaction to something, like something odd, interesting, scary, whatever it is happens, then they're not going to be able to pick up that bit of knowledge and try and apply it. You have to have a certain level of it being imbued within you, it being a skill, it being something which is there to call upon when you need it, without a huge amount of intellectual force to then delve deep and remember, what was that thing they said? In this moment, I shouldn't do this. Maybe I should think about approaching it this way. But it's difficult when you feel like you just want to run away from something. I suppose. And that's one of the nice things about the practice element.
Well, exactly. A lot of the time we get, in the coaching sessions, it will be, this happened. My instinctive response was, "Urgh." Okay, and what's another way of interpreting that? Because I know this is going to sound really trite, and a lot of people say it's easy for you to sit there and say this, Geoff, but even your worst experiences quite often, again, this other phrase, type 2 fun, where things don't seem fun at the time, far from it, but they make great conversation points at dinner tables in a couple of years' time. Or you look back and you think, do you know what? All right, it was painful at the time, but actually that was part of the making of me. And if you can accelerate that process, and often through guided reflection in a safe environment, you can accelerate that process. You can adopt a different perspective of, okay, all right, this is painful right now, and my initial instinct is I'm really annoyed, but actually, how could this potentially be useful to me? Or adopt a different lens and say,
bang on. I mean, I would love to spend the next 20 minutes just having a free therapy session, like talk about my childhood. I talk about childhood and losing my dad and all of that. But I mean, if my dad hadn't died when I was 17, like, I don't think I would have achieved very much at all, if I'm honest with you. Right. Well, because he was disabled, so I was his primary carer, and I never would have felt like I could have left him.
Interesting.
So the fact he left me, even though it was brutal, and many other things happened as a consequence of that, I think even then there was a part of me which was just felt relieved. You know, that I might not have been able to live, or any money, or any food, or any support, but I do see a future now where I'm not going to feel totally like I'm going to be looking after my dad all the time.
Yeah.
And I love doing it, but it's a big burden to carry as a young person.
Yeah. That's an interesting one from a sharing perspective, right? Because, okay, we know each other, but we don't know each other that well. And yet you feeling safe enough to share that with me, I think it is a parallel to those smaller groups, those communities of, all right. And you used the word should earlier on, right? I should be doing this. And that element of obligation, of almost social judgment or even personal judgment of, this is how I should be acting. This is how a product owner should act. This is how an agile leader should act. But actually getting past that should and thinking, well, I'm okay with these options in front of me, and I'm working this through. And actually, this is what I want to do. This is what is right for me and the kind of person that I want to be. That's huge. And you don't get that in a training class. You only get that really through safe conversation.
Yeah. I think in small groups, in one-on-one, it's easy. And as soon as someone sets the bar for their level of openness, generally speaking, unless they have a big wobble, they're going to kind of maintain that level of openness and vulnerability. That's why I think in small groups, even in large groups, maybe it's a little bit harder, but showing openness and showing some vulnerability kind of sets a bar. And maybe for the other people in the room, they've, I don't know, someone's talking about something around product management or product ownership, and they made a big mistake and they're open enough, or they explain how they felt towards someone, and they don't feel proud about it, but that's how they felt. Then the other people in the room, maybe not that session, maybe in future sessions, or maybe in different contexts, to feel a bit more courageous to kind of say, maybe it's okay to talk about these things. And I think that's one of the things that we can do is either provide people with that space and with the support to share things which perhaps they wouldn't want to share, or do it ourselves. And this is one of the things that I found quite fascinating when I was taught team coaching by a couple of brilliant people, Paul Barber and Lucy Widowson. And one of the biggest differences I saw between individual coaching and team coaching was that they were advocating that if you're in a team environment and you're going to go ahead and do something, then you should get involved too, because you need to set the bar for how people are to behave in that situation. And it was almost like, as a professional individual coach, I've been told to maintain distance and it shouldn't be a friendship. But as a team coach, they were like, you can go out for dinner with a team if they invite you out. And you can, if you're doing like a memorable object type activity, you can bring your own. And because you can set the bar for that openness and vulnerability, because it's more difficult in that group environment, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. And I'm still not quite sure how I feel about it. But this is what many professional team coaches do in comparison to the more kind of traditional individual coaches. And I think it can be very valuable for us to get involved ourselves.
Yeah, I agree.
I requested actually that in this episode we spend a bit of time talking about product mastery, particularly your product mastery pathway, because product is something which is, I think, particularly in the Scrum context, and feel free to lambast me on this if you disagree, but I feel that product is just something which has been woefully neglected, I think, for many years. And it's understandable because IT organizations generally look to use Scrum, and lots of people went on Scrum product owner courses and were taught things like estimation and maybe some story mapping or some other little odds and sods, and maybe a notion towards some kind of roadmap or vision. And then the rest of the course was basically like a CSM course covering the same basic stuff. Whilst on the Scrum Mastery perspective, kind of maybe that evolved into more of the agile coaching world, and there's a whole heap of great professional coaching stuff now within that context, and it's not hard to find if you look around. On the product ownership side of things, I still feel like it's just been neglected. Like there's so much great stuff out there which just hasn't been brought into the conversation or the general consciousness of product ownership.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm conscious of time, so I won't go too far into my view of the history and the evolution of it. But in a way, absolutely, to me, it makes a lot of sense that it was neglected. For me, I think if I was going to pick out one thing that was perhaps naive around Scrum, was that this assumption that the product owner has a certain level of authority. So there was an element of, as a Scrum Master, you have no authority to be a leader, but a product owner, you can decide on prioritization. You can ultimately pull rank on all of your stakeholders, and you decide the release date, and you decide this, and you decide that. And in reality, that's rarely the case. And my stance actually is, even if you were in a position where you did have a high level of authority and power, the best product owners don't use it because they're operating in an environment where actually engagement, buy-in, alignment is actually essential for success across an organization, let alone outside the organization. Relying on authority generally doesn't create alignment. So they need to use their personal skills, right? They need to be able to build relationships. They need to be able to build rapport. They need to be able to understand drivers and goals and motivations. They need to be able to inspire. They need to be able to give feedback tactfully. They need to be able to take feedback tactfully. They need to do all of those things rather than just say, this is my way and this is my decision. Yet Scrum originally was, okay, we need to focus on this team side of things. Product owners, you got all this power. You decide this, you decide that. And just get involved a little bit, but you have a lot more. The single ringable neck was actually a phrase that certain agile leaders used, and that's rarely. I mean, it's not very helpful, but equally, it's rarely the case in reality.
Well, I mean, there's and not to go into it, but there is this kind of bit of irony. I think it's irony. I don't know, maybe it's like the Alanis Morissette song "Irony," where none of it's actually ironic, but that it's all about agile, about engaging people and self-organizing, working together, and kind of working together with humility and focus, and engaging with people and getting everyone on board. But if you're a product owner, you can solve all of that. You just make a decision, right, and everyone else has got to dance your tune. Because I don't recall when I was more heavily involved in the Scrum community. I don't really remember too much conversation around saying, as a product owner, you've got to help align, motivate. You've got to help inspire an organization to get behind you. And if you may make a decision as to what's going to happen, then everyone, you want people to be behind that. Otherwise, you're just going to be the person cracking the whip and poking people with sticks because no one's going to believe in it.
Yeah.
And I think that was something which I remember David Hicks did say something which I found really interesting. This is a few years ago. Was that he said vision isn't an artifact. It's a shared understanding. The artifact's just maybe a tool that you can use to help create that. But if you're a product person with a vision, then that's a vision that has to be shared. And I thought that was a nice change in the language I hadn't heard in any previous product owner courses that I'd been on, as far as I could remember.
That's interesting, because I remember David being in the audience of one of my talks many years ago and saying, as a product owner, we were talking about technical debt. And he says, as a product owner, if I want to release something with technical debt, then that's within my purview because I'm the owner of the product. And I think I can see where he's coming from with that, but it doesn't really align with my view of, well, we need to take the longer term and the shorter term. And do I understand the consequences of that, not just in terms of the scalability and the reliability of the product, but also the morale implications it has for other people, and who's going to be the one that's actually supporting that? Probably not him.
No.
So it's a hugely difficult role. I mean, even if that role had power and authority, it would still be a very, very difficult role. But given the phrase of herding cats is something you often hear with product owners, right? They've got to corral all these people with very different agendas, very different incentives, very different perspectives, very different needs into actually the product, what's good for the product and what's good for the organization. And being able to make all the decisions they need to make with limited authority and almost guaranteed imperfect data. It puts a lot of pressure on them as a person. It can put a lot of pressure on their imposter syndrome, their people-pleasing tendencies, their perfectionism. All of those innate characteristics are going to be put under pressure in this role because of the lack of certainty, because of the volatility, the ambiguity, and all of those people who want something from them and they can't please everybody.
So why for the Agile Mastery Institute was it not product ownership mastery and you went for product mastery?
Yeah, because one of the things that's bothered me and is we argue about inconsequential things, really.
We don't.
And one of the less helpful arguments is product owners versus product managers. I don't think it particularly helps. So when I talk about product, I often talk about product leaders, product leadership. But product mastery, for me, the word mastery is important. I think mastery matters. I think it's actually the ability to do your job really well outside of the context of a taught set of rules or framework. So yes, learning tools and techniques and perhaps frameworks can be really, really helpful, but all models are wrong. And so when the concept of mastery came up in education, Benjamin Bloom was talking about being able to take knowledge and apply it in different contexts. And that's, for me, the key here is I'm a product person. Product is important. So I need to be able to take lots and lots of different things, hard skills, technical skills, functional skills, but also personal skills, people skills, and self-management skills, and apply them in my context and continually get better and better and better and better and better at it. So that's why, for me, mastery matters. It's not about learning a tool or a framework, a road mapping canvas or story mapping technique, because if you can't master what's going on for you as a person when you're trying to use those templates or tools or frameworks, then you're not going to get any value from them. I don't know whether that makes sense.
Yeah, so are you saying there's a lot of reflective work then within this to help you understand more about your own motivations and where you sit with things so that you can have the wherewithal to apply your knowledge in different contexts?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, decisiveness, right? So for me, product owners, they need to make lots of decisions. A lot of those decisions, they might have authority and control and power over. Some of them they don't. A lot of decisions they'll actually need to delegate. And so what we spend a lot of time on, we'll give you some tools that you can use to help make better decisions, some mathematical models and so on. But ultimately, so when you're faced with these decisions, what's your default go-to? Do you make too quick a decision? Are you a bit of a precrastinator? I just want this decision off the table as quickly as possible. Do you try and overanalyze the situation? Do you try and put it off because you're worried about how you're going to be judged? And then once you understand yourself, then we can give you some better understanding and some tools and techniques to help bring that characteristic into balance. So actually the trait of decision making becomes a lot easier because we're covering what the root of that is for you.
So what would you say are some of the characteristics that separate a less masterful to a masterful product person, product leader?
Yeah. So I talk about good and great, right? So good product owners do this, great product owners do that. And when it comes to decisiveness, so good product owner, it takes quite a lot of courage to actually delay a decision until they have to be made. Right? It can take quite a lot of courage to say, hold on, we don't need to prioritize that one right now. We don't need to go into detail about that part of the roadmap right now. All right, because there'll be people calling for it. And actually, there's a part of you that would like to clarify that because we like certainty. So good product owners are courageous enough to actually delay decisions until they actually have to make them. But great product owners will decide when they can, because it is easier to just defer that decision until tomorrow or until we've got more information or until we've got more data. But you'll never have perfect data. So when it comes to being decisive, it's a balance between actually delaying until the last responsible moment and making good decisions, not perfect decisions, but good decisions now that are reversible, that are cheap, that are safe, running experiments and so on. So that's one example for me. They'll make good gambles. They'll take calculated gambles. But also they know when to walk away. And very few product owners are comfortable walking away, cancelling a product, stopping a product, killing a product. But that's one of the huge benefits that I've seen from taking an agile approach, is rather than just carrying on throwing good money after bad because we've already spent this much and there's still stuff in the backlog. Well, hold on a minute. It doesn't make sense for us to have another sprint or another release. Let's stop this now and shift our focus to something else. That takes quite a lot of courage.
It does. It takes knowing yourself, but it also takes, going back to what was spoken about earlier, is that no one product owner generally has that unilateral authority to do that. And there's a lot of conversations and alignment behind making such a decision. And we spoke about tech deck and motivation. Say we're not going to have another sprint right now. We're going to take a moment. That can really impact people's motivation. So maybe there's a communications gap to overcome when you're going to make that. There's an environmental gap because maybe you are not in the environment where you can make those calls, or maybe you are, and maybe you make it too rashly. It's a really difficult situation for product people, I feel.
Yeah.
Right?
And so stopping a project, stopping a product, stopping a sprint, that actually taps into, and this is going to sound over dramatic, and it always does, but there's a huge amount of truth to it. There's an element of personal loss to that.
Yeah.
So I have to let go of something that I've put effort into, that I've become attached to. Right, all good product owners become really attached to what they're working on. It's their product, it's their baby, right? But it's not just their baby. So they've got to come to terms with letting go of something, coming to terms with loss. Yeah, it might sound over dramatic, but grieving for it. Yeah, that's definitely part of it in my experience. But also being aware that other people are attached to this as well. Now, if you haven't got the power to kill it, even more so, right? You've got to convince somebody else to let go of something, to come to terms with loss. That could be loss of hope. It could be loss of face, as much as loss of attachment to what they thought was a really good idea. Yeah. But loss is a big part of it as well.
Loss of a bonus, sadly, was one of the things that motivated a lot of people. I never really got bonuses. That wasn't really a problem for me. But I think that's a big thing for people. I think I definitely have seen this with product people, or at least kind of burgeoning product people in large organizations, is that sometimes their person's individual progression is hinged directly or related directly to the success of a release or a particular part of the product. And it isn't just a case of, if you are the main product leader and you've got someone that you've invested in and you've made not promises, but you've said, if you do a good job on this, and I think it'll work out really well at the end of the year, then to turn around and say, by the way, this part, we're not actually going to go ahead with this any further. And that also means that, what I said about your promotion or your bonus or your pay rise probably isn't going to happen either. And I'm really sorry about that. I think working as part of a team and being a leader of a team and being able to have those conversations, understand what promises or commitments to say, or how do you have those hard conversations with people early, is something which I've rarely see spoken about, Geoff. And I would love to get you back for another conversation, perhaps around the Scrum Mastery pathway or the Team Mastery pathway. I'd love to learn a bit more about the Team Mastery pathway, because that's something which I'm super keen on. And I'll mention this at the beginning of the next episode just to annoy people, and I'm glad I'm mentioning it now. When we finish recording today, you're off to go and record an episode of the podcast, your podcast. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Paul Goddard and I have been running the Agile podcast for about 6 years or so now. Yeah, we get together and have a relatively informal chat in a pub over a pint about an Agile topic. And every year we try and change things up a little bit. Yeah, we're going to have a new structure for 2023. So we're excited about it anyway, and hopefully everybody else will enjoy it as well. So check out the Agile podcast.
Yeah, I'll put the details to it in the show notes.
Cool, thanks.
Because it's always, people love a podcast. And I like recommending other ones. So I will definitely put that in the show notes. So Geoff, thank you very much for this conversation around product ownership, product mastery, and we will reconvene shortly to have a delve into Team Mastery. So thank you very much, Geoff. Thank you for listening.
And so ends episode 2 of 3 with Geoff Watts. Now, Geoff will be back for one more short episode in a few days' time, so make sure you subscribe and don't miss that one. This episode saw some absolutely fantastic nuggets of product mastery information. The highlight for me was really contemplating the idea of grieving. when, as a product person, you have to let go of something that you love, no matter how good you thought it might have been. Sometimes these things just don't pay off. So thank you very much for listening. I really hope you've enjoyed your one-on-one time with Geoff Watts. We are always open to hear about your ideas, your comments, your problems, suggestions for what you would like us to cover next. So please do let us know via social media. Thank you once again for listening. My name is Ben Maynard, and this is the Product Agility Podcast.